Hello everyone, I have reverse engineered over dozens of different types of SaaS companies so that I could formulate the perfect GTM strategy for any type of SaaS business that is planning to scale their company from $20,000 monthly recurring revenue upwards to $200,000. Now this type of GTM framework I've been actively and currently applying for most of my clients, so let's literally jump straight to it. Now, the specific framework that I am talking about is the pivot framework. Now, pivot is very simple to remember, but P basically stands for pain, I for ICP, V for visibility, O for outreach, and T for tuning. So together we formulate pivot. And now throughout this entire video, by the end of this video, you will 100% understand the entire framework and how it works, and hopefully you could scale, if not improve, your SaaS business. So let's literally jump straight to it. Now when it comes to pain, specifically P, there's one specific thing that you guys have to look out for. Now a lot of SaaS companies do this wrong, is that they focus on the feature, because your success of your SaaS is projected mainly by two things. Two things I want you to remember forever. The first thing is how big the pain is, because your business, your SaaS product is nothing more than the solution to a pain point. So in other words, the greater the pain, the more money your SaaS company will make. Now it sounds very cliche, and I understand it's a very basic need of psychology, but trust me guys, this is exactly how the market is reflecting it. Now the second component is how well you are providing the solution. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of SaaS founders, they're really focused just on the features. They're focused on, the UI/UX design, the integration, the color, the theme, the backend, the branding, and even the website. But what you have to more focus on is, again, the pain point, but how well you provide this solution, right? So just remember that for now. Now focus on what the market needs, right? Not what you want. Now again, a lot of SaaS founders, they create, these wonderful websites, these wonderful platforms, tools and softwares based on what they want, but not what on the market needs. Now this is a problem, because you have to solve a problem to a pain, not create a product based on what you like and enjoy. I understand the urge. I understand the shiny object syndrome. I understand, they need to have fancy AI integrations. Trust me, all of these things are wonderful, and yes, they contribute to some extent to your SaaS business, but what is most important is solving the pain to your market. Now, pain is what moves the needle, not only in the market, but it's also universal psychology. You want to become rich because you're suffering a pain that you don't want to, from, for example, being broke. And so in other words, the only reason why you are perhaps even watching this video and wanting to make more money for your business is because that your current state right now is some type of pain and suffering, and that you want to move away from it. And so that's essentially from a fundamental layer, from a fundamental perspective of how your SaaS company should operate from the foundations. Now, there are two specific graphs I want you guys to understand. The first one is that the urgency times conversion speed. So the more stronger the pain is, the faster you have users to actually buy and convert, right? And now the second graphic I want you to understand is that urgency removes price resistance. So a lot of people don't understand this, but as long as your pain is there, and as long as your pain is strong, trust me, your users, your clients will be willing to pay for a high ticket offer, no matter how expensive your software is, right? And so, as you can see from this beautiful diagram, this is basically the pain wall. And now stuck, right? If you are currently stuck right now as a SaaS founder, basically the way you view your business is because it's something nice to have, it's something your customers will revisit. It's not really that urgent as well as experimental. Now, if you want to scale your SaaS, you need to focus that revenue is at risk, that certain deals are blocked for your customers, that the deadline is now, so a certain sense of urgency, and also that the churn is spiking. Now, growth only happens after the pain wall is crossed. And so from a pain scale, there's basically a different types of pain gradient, right? So first we have the cosmetic pain, and now the cosmetic pain is basically the nice improvement. For example, you improve the specific features, and then I don't know, your tool just works much smoother, and those leads to faster decisions. Then you have the tactical pain, so let's basically try it, figure out if it works. Then we have the structural pain, meaning okay, now we have to fix this and we should fix this. And then the post-war pain, that basically talks about fast decisions, high urgency, and founder tension. So basically what the graph mentioned earlier. So just bear in mind for now. Now, once you understand the pain point of your market, you basically develop something known as an ideal customer profile. In other words, the ICP. Now, the ICP is very important for you to realize, because ICP is basically the specific persona of customer that you are selling to, right? And so the way I have researched and understood the ICP is basically an intersection of a few fields. The first is economic power. Your ideal customer profile needs to have the money to afford you. And I'll repeat that, because it is always better to sell to winners, right? In other words, sell to customers who have the budget, who have purchased before, because they are willing to spend more. And also those are the people that don't really go through a lot of approvals. So not only the approval hell, but they also control the budget directly, and they already spend, as I mentioned earlier, on tools or services. At the same time, you would want that intersection to the operational exposure. So not only is the ICP people who can actually afford your SaaS, but they have to also be the people that are experiencing the problem. And so those are the ones that run the life system. They own the KPI and outcomes, as well as they feel the inefficiency every single day, or if not weekly. And so basically your ICP is an intersection of those areas. Those are the ones who have fast decisions, high ACV, and low friction. And so it's basically budget authority plus the daily pain. So now you're slowly picturing together. And so understand this, right? If your ICP is nailed down, if you have your ICP very specific, your ideal customer profile, and in just a moment I'll show you how that specifically looks like, so don't panic now. If your ICP is perfectly aligned and you offer the same offer, you will scale much better than broadening your ICP and offering the same type of price or package to different types of ICP. It's better to specify, narrow down, and figure out literally all the way down to the nails of how and what your ICP is, and then offer them the same price instead of just broadening your ICP and offering all of them the same package. Now, how do I figure out whether it's my ICP or whether I'm basically not hitting the target? Now, there's two specific metrics. The first one is the observable signals. So now the observable signals is important, because if you can't observe them, if you actually can't see them or don't know where they are, you can't really target them, right? And so some of the observable signals that you guys will see is first the job titles that exist, the average ICP that exists in the market, public hiring folks, recently raised or expanding. And then from there you have the behavioral signals, which talk about the metrics, complain about the bottlenecks, sorry for the slight spelling error, engage with founder content actively, and responds rationally to rate of investment, right? So those are some of the signals you can detect from your ICP. We'll talk about the signals a little bit more later throughout the different types of channels, so just bear with us for now. Just understand that there are certain ICP signals and behavioral signals that you should look out for when realizing your ICP. Now, what is an ICP? How does that even look like? And how do I create one myself, right? And so it's very simple. So your ICP, I want you guys to understand, is not something that is static. Your ICP is not a one-time profile creation and just remains for the next few years. In fact, most SaaS companies who do not evolve their ICP are those SaaS companies that fail or do not see scalable growth. And so your ICP evolves over time. When you are new and founding your SaaS business, you have a foundational version or your first version of your ICP, and over time as your SaaS grows, so does the same time your ICP as well. Now, when your SaaS is stuck at 20k a month, to $20,000 a month, for example, you need to evolve your ICP. Your ICP has unlimited amounts of updates. as long as the need of the market exists, and usually that is the case as the pain never goes away. And it's funny because with that type of understanding, saturation, right, market saturation in that nature shouldn't even exist. If your market is a huge, for example, your SaaS is serving customers that are focused on compliance, the need is always there, and so technically the entire motto of, or the entire market is saturated and there's no point for selling my SaaS, is total bollocks. Now later during the tuning stage, which is the final stage of the framework, I will show you guys how the evolution actually looks like. Now a little bit more to your ICP. As you can see, the ICP is determined by a few stuff, but it is not limited to. You can talk about the title, you can talk about the specific area. Now this ICP is an example of a SaaS that is focused on compliance, providing ISO framework compliance for tech companies, and so this is basically the ICP for that SaaS company. As you can see, CEO, small medium enterprise, ISO consultancy, the ICPs that prefer accuracy, that are very time saving as well as efficient. Now this is another target ICP specifically for a, if not the same company, primary decision maker, the CEO founders, that sell specifically into enterprise banks, ISO 27001, and then there's also the secondary influencers, CTO, head of engineering, compliance managers, and the co-buying triggers, or basically the pain point, is deals blocked at procurement, meaning they aren't able to basically generate revenue or sales because they're literally blocked, lost or delayed of revenue, and urgent ISO framework requirement. Now, if you are running your SaaS, your ICP will essentially look something like this. Obviously, this is an example for a SaaS company, but you understand the point of your ICP. Next, let's talk about visibility. Now, visibility is very important, and now we are slowly getting to the heart of the GTM framework. Now, the reason why I've created the specific GTM framework in such a way where I focus on inbound first and then outbound is because of the following. Now, visibility is equals to traffic. Traffic equals to leads, and lead equals to potential sales. Now, any type of traffic is always a potential customer. You need a funnel system to capture cold traffic and turn them into warm leads. After you have generated warm leads, launching an outbound campaign seems to be very, very effective. So as I mentioned at the very beginning during the introduction of my video, I've literally reversed engineered over dozens of different types of SaaS companies, and in the future YouTube videos along, I will be posting specific breakdowns of each SaaS company, so do subscribe and stay tuned if you're interested in that. But yes, it's very exciting, and let's focus back more on the framework. Now, because why waste our cold calling, cold emailing, and cold messaging if outbound on warm leads is more effective? So the golden nugget here, according to the philosophy and the GTM strategy after reverse engineering over dozens of different SaaS companies, in my opinion, I prefer to focus on inbound first, and from the inbound you funnel the cold traffic so that they become warm leads, and from the warm leads there you create the outreach campaigns. I understand that cold calling or cold email and cold messaging, these are all great strategies, you know, just reaching out, calling and stuff like that. I've understand that and I've been through that as well, but I just generally see from other SaaS companies that why not, if you are able to capture the cold traffic from organic channels such as LinkedIn or YouTube, in just a moment I'll talk about it, and then create warm leads out of them and then do an outbound campaign to the same people, I just think that is much more effective, right? Now, let's talk about why I think so, right? Why visibility comes before outreach. Now, if we are doing cold outreach, it's basically more like testing the cold waters, right? There's no context, no trust, high resistance. You're basically blasting, whether it's emails, messages, or calls, to a pool of, you know, potential customers and figuring out whether they're interested or not. But why not, right, do the visibility primed outreach? Now imagine the same cold traffic have seen your LinkedIn, read articles about, you know, your SaaS topic online, or have even watched your YouTube videos. Wouldn't that be logically better to convert those people who have seen your content already rather than just cold outreaching, right? Because cold outreach is firstly longer sales cycles, there's more objections, and also there's price pressure. Now, I'm not saying that cold outreach is a bad thing. I'm just saying that if you use warm outreach and do cold outreach for people who have already visited your page, I just believe it's much more effective. I think they're faster replies, shorter call times, and just a higher closing rates. Outbound works better when inbound goes first. Basically, that is my framework. Now, pivot visibility engine. Now, V is for visibility. Now, this is specifically the inbound. Now, a few, but it's not limited to, after reverse engineering dozens of these SaaS companies, the best type of channels where I've seen they've used inbound is first LinkedIn. Now, I will create a separate YouTube video because this is perhaps my favorite area on how to essentially establish a really good LinkedIn inbound funnel. Now, I'll make a whole separate video because that's another long video. But a LinkedIn inbound funnel to basically use organic LinkedIn content to create a lot of impression, a lot of engagement for users to come towards your LinkedIn, and on your LinkedIn they'll basically go through the next stage of funneling, which I'll talk about in just a moment, and from there you can send the outreach campaign. So LinkedIn is the first, then SEO, natural Google traffic, for example, users who are interested in compliance or users who are interested in, sales and CRM. Basically, from organic Google traffic, they can also be able to go through your inbound. Then YouTube, I'm a huge fan of YouTube, hence why I'm creating these YouTube videos. It's because YouTube, especially long form content, is much better when it comes to actually establishing a connection with the audience, because you are basically going through your frameworks just as I am, going through your specific systems that you're using, and your audience will basically just get to know you much closer. Finally, meta organic. Now, this really depends, because when I broke down the different types of funnels from different types of SaaS, it really depends what type of SaaS company. But if you are a SaaS company operating in the e-commerce space, for example, then you should rely on meta organic traffic, both on Instagram and Facebook, right? And so from these type of inbound channels, you will create the trust, familiarity, as well as the intent accumulation, basically transitioning from the cold type of traffic through your organic content eventually into warm potential leads. Now let's zoom out of this. And so now the visibility channels map to buyer intent. So as you can see, I laid out LinkedIn, SEO, YouTube, meta organic. Now there's a higher demand capture if you obviously use inbound, because if inbound, it actually compounds intent over time, because the people that are organically, on your page, liking or interacting with your post, those people won't go, suddenly away, or will, just suddenly disappear and not forget about your content. I don't know, a week or a day later, if you're consistently posting, they'll still interact with your content. In opposed to cold outreach, you do one sales call, right? And then they give you, a sense of objection the first time. Unless you call them again, these people will actually completely forget about you, right? But organic inbound is quite the opposite, right? So LinkedIn inbound funnel, as I mentioned earlier, I will make a complete different YouTube video on it, because this is very, very exciting. But it's basically using LinkedIn to generate an entire mechanism of inbound traffic, and from there people will click on your profile. They'll recognize it's themselves because they are the ICP. And then from the founder-led content, FLC, I like to call it, on LinkedIn, they will eventually interact and get to know you better. And from that, you will transition them into more of an outbound campaign. And from there, they will hopefully purchase from your SaaS. Now, all for outreach. Now, once we understood that inbound happens first, outreach or outbound is the second part. So again, according to my GTM framework, which I have again reverse engineered over dozens of them, I believe if you focus on inbound first and then do outbound, I believe that is just much more effective. Now the modern outbound stack, let's talk about the outreach engine. Now the modern outbound stack, according to Pivot, is basically, again, reaching out or creating an outbound campaign to people who have already interacted with you, whether it's on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Google. They are familiar with your SaaS, they are familiar with the founder, which is you, and from there, once you have the type of leads and the type of contacts and the cold traffic that you have accumulated, then you are so-called creating a warm outreach. Now, visibility multiplies outreach, which is great, not the other way around. Cold versus warm outreach. Now, let's compare that again. I did it earlier, but let's be a little bit more in depth. Now, if we do cold outbound, it's cold leads, you have a specific sales script, there's high volume and perhaps low reply percentage rates. Again, there's no context, no trust, high resistance, and volume dependent. Now, this is great if you are, I don't know, doing sales in consulting business and whatever else. But with SaaS, with a software company, you have the advantage to actually use warm outreach as a as an outreach strategy, because you can interact with people that have seen with your content, that have, are familiar with your name. You have already introduced yourself and basically explain what you do, and you just have a higher reply rate because they have been exposed prior. You already build the trust, there's less friction, and there's also a pre-decision drive. Outbound doesn't fail, cold outbound does. Now, outbound channel roles, and this is very important. What are the different types of areas that we can focus on when it comes to outbound from the inbound, right? So we have cold email, cold calling, LinkedIn ads, and meta ads. Now, this is very, very important because I've also checked a few creators on YouTube and online, see what type of outbound strategy they use. I've seen a lot focus on meta ads and LinkedIn ads. Now, whether it works for you or not really depends, and it really depends which type of industry I would say your SaaS is in. Again, where I reverse engineered, the different types of SaaS companies. There are some SaaS companies who do not use LinkedIn ads at all, that do not use meta ads at all, but the most popular one or the most frequently used I've seen is the cold email outbound. And so I'll give you a very simple funnel example. You use a LinkedIn founder-led content on LinkedIn. The people have interacted with your content and they have decided to book a call with you, with your sales team on LinkedIn. And from there on, you go on a sales call with them, you get their contact, you get their email, and from there you create a cold outbound email campaign. Now, I've seen meta ads used, for example, on retargeting. If you're a SaaS company who have a lot of users who are fluctuating, meaning a few months they will use your software and then a few months later they will stop using your software. I've seen a lot of SaaS companies use meta ads to actually retarget the same type of people that have used your software before. Now, the outbound philosophy is very, very simple. The visibility, trust, familiarity is at the very beginning, and this happens obviously very often. It's from your organic posting, it's from your YouTube videos, from your SEO organic traffic, and from there you have the targeted outreach. You basically create a list of clients, warm leads of different types of customers that are potentially using your SaaS, and then from there you create the high intent conversations, or in other words, the different type of outbound areas, whether it's email, calling, meta ads, and LinkedIn. The outbound leverage curve, which I like to talk about, is, as you can see, if it's warm outreach, the cold outbound is just exponential. You can use the same message, you can use the same offer, but you will get different results. And it's obviously exponential because, at warm outreach, the customers that have interacted with you before, they're just much more highly likely to respond to your messages, especially to your cold outreach, to your outbound systems, because they have interacted with you before. Now, the final pillar of the SaaS GTM framework is the tuning. Now, tuning is very important because tuning is the area you want to focus on, especially when you are scaling. Now, let's talk about the difference between acquisition and tuning, because acquisition, from how I understand it, is very often specialized and prioritized in the beginning. If you are a SaaS company, perhaps making less than 20,000 monthly recurring revenue per month, your system is mainly focused on acquisition, marketing, sales, acquisition. And so from acquisition, you have longer sales cycles, there's channel fatigue, and also rising CAC. However, if you focus on tuning, there's zero CAC, shorter decision cycles, and it's built on trust. Tuning turns revenue into margin. Acquisition just buys attention. Now let's elaborate those very confusing words a little bit more specific. So I want you guys to understand that tuning basically works in a flywheel. Now flywheel is basically like a spiral system or snowball effect, like people call it. And so when one improves, it basically just spirals and gets better and better over time. So at the very beginning, we have usage signals. So those are basically the feature adoption, seed activity, and workflow depth. And so basically you look at the users who are actively using your SaaS, and from there you get specific feedbacks, right? And from there, once you receive the feedbacks, you start solving the problems for them. So essentially you are removing the friction. Then you figure out the onboarding gaps, the time to value, as well as the UX blockers or specific features or, I don't know, graphics of your SaaS that are just hindering from the user to complete his duty, right? From there we have the revenue expansion, we have the upsells, we have the multi-seat and the enterprise tiers. Now this is the stage if you are going from 20k a month to 150 to 200k a month. That's where you are focusing on, and that is the area that, again, as I will mention in the future videos, an area that you want to focus on when you are essentially removing a lot of the friction from your current customers. Now expansion triggers. Now from the expansion triggers, we have seed expansion, usage caps, advanced features. Now this is basically very similar to revenue expansion. The only difference is this is more technical. Again, I might need to use create another YouTube video to elaborate this a little bit more. Now most companies try to scale before tuning, and that's why they bleed margin. Where are we? Land, tune, scale. Now that is basically the approach I like to say to companies that are scaling. Acquire the right ICP, and that is again very, very important, where you solve the urgent pain and you win trust from your customers early. Then you basically fine tune that, you improve activation, you expand usage, and you increase your ACV, and obviously you reduce your churn, which is basically all the obstacles. Then you scale, predictable revenue, strong LTV, CAC, and faster GTM loops. If the supposed to be MRR isn't growing, your GTM promise is lying to your product. Expansion path maps. Now, when it comes to expansion, you can start with seed expansion, where you basically have team adoption, organization-wide rollout, also per seat pricing leverage. Then the existing customers. From there, you go to feature expansion, use case expansion, and pricing architecture. Now, I realized that perhaps the expansion part, the tuning part, I will have to go through this again in more detail so I can elaborate and explain this to you guys a little bit more better, because at the current stage I was actually more focused on these four, because when I reverse engineered most of the companies, most of the SaaS business out there, I fundamentally focused on this part. So for the fine-tuning part, just bear with me now. I will perhaps create another video on how to actually properly elaborate this. I do apologize. But for now, just understand that more customers doesn't mean more money. Your goal is to increase the average order value. We see this in e-commerce too. So basically, your goal is not to obtain 1,000 customers. Your goal is to increase the average order value per customer. For example, if one customer's average order value is $20 per month, you would want to try to increase that value to $30 or $40 a month, right? And so fine-tuning means improving the current service delivery for already existing users. Now, regular customers are the best buyers. You can always milk out a lot of the existing buyers. In fact, Andrew Tate once said, the easiest money is selling to people that have bought from you before. And so those are the specific tactics that I tried to elaborate earlier regarding, expanding the seats, upselling on features or tools, multiple seats, enterprise tiers, custom feature, and then now I see a lot of SaaS companies use the AI tools. And so basically, in a nutshell, that is the GTM framework, the pivot framework I've broken down. I hope you have enjoyed this video. In my future videos, I will be breaking down specifically all the different types of SaaS GTM funnels. I will go through each pillar one by one, so that I can be much more accurate, especially when delivering the specific type of technicals, so that you guys can hopefully use this type of knowledge for your SaaS business and improve your GTM system and hopefully make more money. And so if you enjoyed this, do subscribe, and otherwise I'll see you guys in the next video.